Hello and welcome to another episode of It's Not About the Fucking Food. And today I'm going to be talking about what our eating disorders do for us. Why do we need them? And this is something that I don't think we look at so often when we're talking about eating disorder, disordered eating, recovery, because we're so focused on getting rid of the eating disorder. We're so focused on getting rid of the behaviours and fighting against the eating disorder that we forget to look at actually how it's helping us, what it's doing for us. And when we start to address these things, we can add in healthier, more supportive mechanisms and let the ones that maybe don't serve us so well fall away. And there's a really simple framework that I use to help clients, to help people really understand what their eating disorder is doing for them. And as a result, then looking at what we can add before we take away. And this is something that I really do differently with so many of my clients, is that I really focus on adding things to their toolbox rather than just focusing on taking away the behaviour. The behaviour exists for a reason. There's a reason why we're restricting. There's a reason why we're struggling with exercise compulsion. There's a reason why we're struggling with anxiety. If we don't add healthy coping mechanisms back in, I always see it as taking away the safety net underneath us and leaving us on that really wobbly tightrope. And we feel that when we're in recovery, when we take those behaviours away without replacing and adding healthier coping mechanisms in first, we're gonna feel frightened, we're gonna feel unsettled, we're going to feel terrified, and as a result we're going to run back to the safety that we know, which is our eating disorders and disordered eating and the behaviours that comes with it. So there's a huge way that I help clients safeguard their own recoveries by actually looking at what the eating disorder is doing for them and then adding stuff back in. So coming back to my super easy framework. Now it's called the 5 Human Needs Framework, and this is something that I have seen used in multiple ways. We've got Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which this is slightly drawn on. There's the growth framework. There's lots of NLP frameworks that flow into this. But these are the 5 main human needs that I see having a huge impact in people's journeys to recovery. The first need is a need for safety. Now, quite often with eating disorders, disordered eating, anxiety, we have a high need for control. We need to be in control to be safe. And this often comes from when we have grown up in environments where we didn't feel like we were in control, where we felt like we had limited control. And so we started to control one of the things that we could control in our lives. And having a toddler myself, there are very few things that they can't have control over in their own lives. But one thing that they can do is choose what they put in their mouths. And we see increasing amounts of young people using food as a way to control their own lives and have that element of control within their lives, especially if there's unsettling stuff going on in the environment around them. And so if you identify with being a little bit of a control freak, or maybe, as I like to term it, a control enthusiast, I put my hand up, definitely me there as well, then really looking at whether this is a big part of your eating disorder, your disordered eating, and starting to understand that actually this is something your eating disorder, disordered eating is doing for you, is giving you that sense of control. Now, once we understand that it's giving us that sense of control, again, we can, like I mentioned earlier, we can add in healthier coping mechanisms in to resource that need for control through safety, through control, essentially, to help you feel safer, to help you not need the eating disorder to do that so much for you. And quite often these behaviours start to be less needed and fall away as a result. So some things that you can do to create safety for yourself is regulating your own nervous system. So often we live in this fight, flight, freeze state, and so we feel unsafe. And so learning to regulate our nervous system, get into that rest and digest nervous system immediately is going to take that pressure of us needing to work so hard to feel safe. And a really simple technique that I teach all the time is breathing in for 4 and out for 7. Breathing in for 4 and out for 7. You can do that loads of times. You can do it while the kettle's on, you can do it while you're driving your car, you can do it while you're waiting for people to join a meeting. Like, the breath is always with us. It's why it's such a powerful tool, and that alone is going to help regulate your nervous system. But also thinking about some healthy ways we can create that sense of control. Can you create more structure in your lives? Are there boundaries you need to put in place with other people to help you feel safer? All ways that we can start to put our healthy toolbox in place to resource that sense of safety through control, so that our eating disorder isn't having to work so hard for us. The second need is a need for variety. Whilst we all have a need for routine, for safety, for control, we also need variety. We need to have things shaken up from time to time in our lives. This is why we look forward to the weekend. It's why we look forward to going on holiday. And we need that variety. And this is something we see more of a need for in people who struggle with things like binge eating, comfort eating, than people that struggle with restrictive eating disorders, because that need for control is so much higher for them. But thinking about the ways that our eating disorder might meet that need for variety for us, maybe you have a food rotation in place, maybe you have some really strict rules about what you can eat every day to make sure you have enough variety. And actually thinking about how we can add that variety in healthier ways, for example, changing our route to work, the way that we drive to work, maybe the way we walk to work, changing our route, maybe thinking about planning in some different things over the weekend that we're going to find fun and enjoyable. Life gets to be fun, it gets to be enjoyed, and we get to create space for that. So the third need is a need to be loved. We all have a need to be loved. Now, we grow up in a world where, and we're probably going to do a whole podcast on this separately, where we're told that we need to be in a certain size body, to look a certain way, to be loved, liked and accepted. And that's quite often a big way that the eating disorder comes in, the disordered eating comes in to encourage us to manipulate our weight and shape in order to make us more lovable. And more attractive and more wanted and acceptable by society. And the key answer for this, really, and the way that we tackle this the best, is by by doing the work to actually love ourselves, to accept ourselves as we are, and doing that internal self-love work. And we can do that through belief work. We can do that through really simple things like creating time for self-care. Self-care is so beneficial for us in so many ways. It helps us regulate our nervous system. It helps us tell ourselves that we're worthy of taking that time, actually, as well. It's a huge way that we can really teach ourselves that we are lovable just as we are. And there's also another need that I'll come on to in a minute, that self-care again really helps us look after ourselves. So creating that time to have a bath, creating that time to read, creating that time to do whatever feels good for you, to meditate, whatever feels good for you, whatever fills up your self-care cup is going to teach you that you are worthy of that love and acceptance. And obviously I do a lot of deeper work with that through with the work I do with my clients, through my courses and programs, but some really simple things that you can do today and start doing today to meet your need to be loved, so that your eating disorder and disordered eating isn't having to work so hard for you. The fourth need is connection. We're human beings. We grew up in tribal societies. We all need to be loved and part of a community. And actually this comes back to, from an evolutionary perspective, if we weren't accepted by our tribe, we'd likely be ousted and would therefore be unsafe. So this comes back to a really primal need within us to be part of a community, to be accepted, to be loved and liked. And it's really this one's kind of overarches both needs here. But connection can be something that is met by eating disorders and disordered eating in lots of ways. Being part of a running club, for example, a gym, can be a way that we meet our need for connection. Identifying with having an eating disorder or our anxiety or autoimmune condition, and therefore being part of a community, is again a way we meet our need for connection. And the real remedy for this is coming back to ourselves, coming back to ourselves and connecting with ourselves, rather than just focusing on connection with other people, albeit that's really important, and then building those healthy connections. We also get to really connect to ourselves and our bodies, and we are so inherently disconnected when we're dysregulated, when we're living in that hustle, fight, flight, freeze, push, 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 do more, be more, and not taking that time for ourselves. So really coming back to ourselves again, and taking that time to be with ourselves is hugely important and can feel really uncomfortable. But by creating those little moments, again, you just, in a simple 4-7 breath, it's creating that time for you and asking you to connect back to yourself and your body. Okay. And the fifth need is significance. We all want to feel important. We all need to feel like there's a purpose for us being here. We all need to have some level of significance, of self-worth. And the eating disorder can do this in lots of ways, and lots of ways indirectly as well. Quite often the people that I work with and see in my line of work struggle with things like people pleasing, saying yes to everybody else and not themselves, because they resource their worth externally. If they do enough for other people, then they'll feel good enough. If they say no to somebody, they're prioritising themselves, and that feels sticky, right? People pleasing is a huge way that people with eating disorders and disordered eating resource that level of significance. If I do enough, then I'll feel important. Maybe you do loads of overtime and have no boundaries around your energy, around your work, because you think that if you're going to do all the things, then you'll feel good enough. Again, whilst this is not necessarily an eating disorder behaviour, it's massively something that fuels the eating disorder. And again, we're digging into those layers beneath of why, that it's an eating disorder, disordered eating affects all areas of our life, all areas of our brain, and it goes back to that really deep subconscious programming, which I'll talk more and more about. But hopefully this has given you an insight into what maybe your eating disorder is doing for you and what you can really do to help yourself. Self-care knocks a couple of those out, connection, love, significance, and I forgot to say, when we're doing self-care, we're again saying, I'm worth this, I am a significant human being. And again, we get to do the belief work and the deep work around that, as I do in my work, but we also get to make those really simple changes. Self-care knocks out 3 of those straight away. Create some simple variety in your life. Create some simple ways where you can feel more regulated just by breathing, for example, or maybe creating some healthy structure in other areas of your life. It gets to be simple, it gets to be easy. And when we start to look at what our eating disorder is doing for us, and maybe there's one area of your life where you're like, oh my God, this is my biggest problem. The biggest thing my eating disorder does for me is create a huge sense of control. Then focus on that, focusing on adding healthy behaviours in that help you feel safe, even before you think about taking the other stuff away. Add stuff in first, let that settle, notice how it feels. Maybe you need to add more stuff in afterwards, more practices, more things where you're noticing that actually you can have more control in your life. It will snowball. The more you take control, the more you empower yourself, the more you'll feel empowered to make other decisions. Control is so often a huge part of the puzzle for people. I hope you found that useful. I hope you've learned something today and maybe walked away thinking that maybe you get to work with yourself a little bit here rather than constantly working against yourself, because it's really, really exhausting. And it gets to be easy. When we add stuff in first, everything gets to feel so much easier. And I will see you on the next podcast.